At the end of my last video, I asked you to leave questions down in the comments which I'm going to be answering at the end of the year. And today is the first day of 2022. Man, I'm not even used to saying 2021 and I'm supposed to say 2022 now. Wait, I just realized that there won't be this many 2s in the year number for like another 100 years now. Damn. Well, anyway, it's time to answer your questions. So, the first question comes from, this person who asks whether or not I'd rather have a career that is more stressful and has a lower salary, but I'm passionate about, or a more comfortable but boring career so I could focus on my passion and projects during my free time. So this question is really subjective to the individual, but I suppose I'll try to answer these questions from the perspective of myself personally. So I personally quote-unquote prefer to not have a career at all, in the sense that what I find drives me the most is not really a career path, but instead some sort of a meaning or a means to an end behind my actions. So for example, I am much more fulfilled working on these YouTube videos and doing a few other things on the side, despite me currently making less than minimum salary from it. I used to have a rather laid-back development job a few years ago, from which I collected savings for a few years, but the moment I had enough savings saved up, I completely lost all motivation towards working at a company because I didn't find it productive for myself, as what I did on the side felt more important and impactful in the long run. I actually did a few short freelance gigs for a pretty nice hourly salary after that, but even then I just hated it the whole time because I felt like I was wasting my time and didn't have any passion for it. I actually don't like doing almost any creative work such as video editing or graphics design, as well as programming for someone else, because I just won't have the same passion for what I'm working on if it's something that I'm not making for myself. So honestly, at this point, if I had to get a job, I'd prefer physical labor like shoveling snow or something over sitting in the office, because I'm already sick of that in the first place. Of course, those jobs don't really pay much, but I wouldn't have to do it forever if one day I can monetize my own projects. So until then, I just need to not burn out and to cover the costs of living. So, next question. Do you make videos for yourself to document your progress and accomplishments, or do you make them to inspire people, or some completely different reasons such as financial, experimental, and etc.? Well, I make videos for all kinds of reasons, including all the ones you mentioned. But in addition to that, I just generally like making videos, and I've been actually making them on YouTube since 2009. I actually even made them on like my Sony Ericsson phone in something like 2008, which had some kind of a video editing program installed on it. I used to do YouTube as a hobby, which is still pretty much the case because I enjoy it, but I also do want to make it into a quote-unquote career so I could have more time and reason to make videos as opposed to something else. And a big reason for why is because it scales very well in terms of outreach. And the end game for me would be to use this outreach in the most impactful way I can, be it through fundraising, spreading awareness, or even just inspiring people to be more proactive. Moving on, how do you know whether or not something is your true passion or just something you should brush off and keep on moving forward? Well, it's really hard to say, but generally speaking, if it's something you keep on coming back to or keep having inspirations for, it's a pretty good indicator that you do have some level of passion for it. But also, if you're trying to achieve some sort of an end goal, very often the means you take to reach those goals can become your passion. For example, earlier I said that I don't like doing video editing or coding for someone else. In fact, I kind of hate it. But when I do it for my own sake, it's suddenly something that I do have some passion for. I actually don't even always enjoy video editing or coding. It can be very grindy and frustrating. However, the good part for me is the satisfaction of finishing something and the inspiration I get for the next project from the one I just finished. If it comes to being passionate about one singular activity, I'd say I'm 10 times more passionate about playing League of Legends than I am about video editing. However, in the long run, it's more fulfilling to do something that has some sort of a meaning than something that is just fun but not sustainable on its own. So, next question. Would you consider learning to play an instrument? I play the piano and it's quite fun. I don't have any plans on learning instruments as of now, but I used to play the drums a little bit as a child, and at one point like 10 years ago I kinda wanted to learn to play the guitar after watching Tenacious D, but that's pretty much it. So, what are your thoughts on the computer programming field? Well, that's kind of a vague question, but I assume it's meant as in learning it in college. In which case, I mean sure, you can go and learn CS in university, however, if your only goal is to get a job and to learn coding, you're much better off just self-learning it it and building a portfolio. So in my opinion, CS is only a good field to take in school if you intend on going beyond bachelor's to get something like a PhD, in the case that you're interested in research and the actual science of computer science. There is nothing wrong with just getting a CS degree for your career, but it's not necessary and it's not as valuable as an actual track record and a portfolio. A lot of people come out of college with a CS degree without still knowing how to code, nor having a portfolio that proves that they're reliable and actually know how to learn on their own, so they often have a much harder time finding a job with a degree than somebody who has just a small portfolio. So, next question. You have multiple aims that need many hours to complete, so my question is, do you have a job that lets you do whatever you want for however many hours you want? Well, like I said earlier, currently I don't really have a real job, but since YouTube is basically my main source of income, in a way it is my job to learn Japanese and so on. However, I used to learn Japanese and work on projects even when I was working full-time, but at one point I was able to start working half-time instead of full-time, and that was a huge improvement, as I instantly was able to spend way more time on working on my own stuff and having more time to rest as well. So if you're in a similar situation, I recommend instead of working 5 days a week, working something like 3 days a week, and you can use those extra 2 to 4 days productively. Alright, so do you plan on using your Japanese skills for business or just for recreational stuff in the future? Well, mostly recreational stuff, because I'm not sure if I'll ever have any formal business meetings in Japan. However, I do plan on incorporating Japanese into my future projects. For example, if I made a game, I would love it to have a Japanese localization and so on, but I probably wouldn't be the one localizing it, because a good quality native Japanese localization requires an incredibly high level of Japanese and, even more importantly, proper native vibes. So I also might make some videos and stuff like that in the future which require me to speak Japanese, so I don't know, we'll see. So the next question is, how do you have time in your day for all of this? Do you go to work or school? And I guess I already answered pretty much all of this in previous questions, so I don't really have anything extra to add to this question. So another question, how do you manage burning out? Well, this is a really hard to answer question, because burnout can stem from so many different sources and can manifest itself in different ways. For example, the biggest burnout I experienced was when I quit my job, and that mostly stemmed from me not seeing value in myself working there anymore, yet continuing to do so, mixed with a bunch of other stuff as well. I'm still planning on making a separate video on burnout one day, so I'll probably go more in depth in there, but one thing which is important to keep in mind is that resting, aka recovery, is a part of work as well, and you don't always have to have an all or nothing mentality. And even with things such as Anki, where you have to do your reviews every single day, there are ways to reduce the number of reviews you have without having to quit entirely, and so on. So next up we have a bunch of questions coming from Gorter-san, starting with, if there was no pandemic, would I move to Japan or would I just visit as a tourist and stay in Estonia? Well, I definitely plan on visiting Japan one day and staying for as long as I can, like for at least a month or so, to see what life there is like. And after that, if I do decide that I would like to live in Japan, even if it's only for like a few years, I definitely start thinking about it. I don't really mind living here either, but it would be nice to see what living abroad in a different environment and culture would be like. So then the next question is, have you done any other jobs besides YouTube whilst running your channel? So like I said before, I did have a job and a few freelance gigs before, but there is also this other thing I'm working on that I also consider a job in a way, but if I ever talk about it on YouTube, it's going to be in some future video. So, how do you avoid getting colds all the time? Well, the trick is to never go outside and to never meet anyone. And their final question is, let's have a beer together. This is not a question, let's do it. And I'm afraid that I will catch a cold if I did that, so I'll have to pass, I'm sorry. So here comes another question asking about if I play any instruments, which I already said no to earlier. But if I don't play one, which one would I learn? I think if I were to learn an instrument, it would be for the sake of being able to make my own soundtracks for future projects. I suppose the piano and or some string instrument will probably be very useful for that. And also learning some music software sounds very handy as well, as then I can probably do pretty much anything. So moving on to the next question. What are your favorite / recommended books, anime and games? So when it comes to books, I have read some over the past 5 years, mostly non-fiction, but through like the early 2019 to early 2021, I wanted to say 2020 again. I read 3 novels as well, which I usually never do, and they all were by Yukio Mishima. And I'm not really sure if I recommend them for everyone, but I definitely felt like I gained something from reading them, and yes, it took me 2 years to finish 3 rather short books, so. As for anime, I really want to recommend the Blackjack OVA, which is a really underrated anime that I just finished watching and sentence mining. The issue just is that the OVA doesn't really explain pretty much anything about the characters and whatnot, since it assumes that you already have that knowledge which you can get by reading the original manga or I guess watching all the 62 episodes of the 2004 TV series, which I also recommend, but since it's a Golden Time TV series, it's more wholesome and lower budget compared to the OVA. And lastly, when it comes to video games, I suppose generally I've always been a PC gamer and I've liked various sorts of games throughout the years, but I have most playtime in competitive online games such as League, Counter-Strike, as well as MMOs such as RuneScape and World of Warcraft. I also gotta mention American McGee's Alice since I feel like it's a pretty underappreciated game, but this list is really short and doesn't do justice to all the games I've played, so maybe one day I'll make some personal video about all the ones I've played throughout my life where I can go into more detail. If you want a game in Japanese, I recommend Ghost Trick, which you can play on an emulator. On the surface, it may not look too interesting, but honestly I was surprised at how well crafted the story and gameplay actually were, so I do recommend it. I also played Half-Life recently and that was pretty nice. So next up, how do you plan your time if you do, and why do you plan it or don't? So I don't really plan my time formally and I don't have a schedule or anything like that either. I just mostly have certain stuff I want to get done throughout the day and I do them in whatever order feels most appropriate for each day. And why is because that's just how I find it works best for me. I think I've never liked planning time or having a schedule. I kind of hate that sort of stuff, and I think a large reason for why is because I've always had a serious issue with being able to keep a consistent sleep schedule my entire life. Because for some reason I need nearly 10 hours of sleep every day and that doesn't work really well in the 24-hour cycle. So, what plans do you have for the channel for the next year or two? I have quite a lot of really epic videos planned, including potentially some multi-part series as well as some type of content that I haven't yet uploaded onto this channel. In my last video, I also asked if you would be interested in seeing some game dev videos, and I had so many comments saying yes on a video that currently only has about 3,000 views, so I might need to figure out a way to make some time for game development sometime in the near future as well. But overall, my biggest dream for this channel would be to break out of the niche and to be able to upload any kind of content I want and to still be able to get the same amount of views. That way, it'll be worth it to go all out on videos that are very bad in terms of the algorithm, but I would be passionate about making. For example, my videos about learning Japanese and languages obviously get way more views than the more personal ones, even if I put a lot of effort into them. But despite that, I'm still very happy with how much interaction my non-language learning videos get as well, and I'm still going to continue making those kinds of videos since that's what makes YouTube fun for me, and I don't want to be stuck making videos about a single topic or in a specific format. However, I'm obviously still going to be making videos about learning languages and Japanese because I do enjoy it, and I have many things I look forward to when it comes to learning Japanese, and that includes making videos about it. In fact, many of my upcoming videos are all going to be about learning Japanese, and I'm pretty excited to start working on those. So, what interests do you have that you haven't mentioned on the channel yet? I do have some interests which I haven't really mentioned yet, one of them being lifting / strength training / bodybuilding, which I've been doing on and off for around 5 years by now. But recently, I've been lifting more frequently and consistently than ever before, so it is a pretty big part of my daily life right now. I might even make some videos about it in the future, so if you're interested in that, please do let me know. I also used to be really into hobbies such as BMX and scootering, and I don't think I've ever been as passionate towards any hobby throughout my life as much as I was towards those. Unfortunately, I don't really ride anymore, but I will probably revisit it again one day for sure. Alright, so their last question is if I have any favorite or recommended YouTube channels. Well, I've had so many different favorite YouTubers over the years, and I used to watch YouTube way more than I do now, but I think if I had to choose only one YouTuber as my favorite, I think I'd say Video Game Donkey, because he's the only channel that I have consistently watched throughout the years, and I also have seen most of their videos. I might make some more in-depth video about this topic one day, but I suppose for this video, I can recommend some Japanese channels such as Piropito, who has my favorite Minecraft Let's Play series of all time, then Setokoji, who also has a Minecraft Let's Play, but also has a great channel on top of that, and then I'd like to recommend RRR to XXX, who is a rather unknown Japanese let's player with a pretty chill personality and plays rather niche games such as the Tomb Raider series and so on. And lastly, I'd like to recommend Papa Papa, who has some rather surreal comedic videos in Japanese. So, 3 questions coming from Logui-san, the first one being any favorite manga or anime. Well, I guess Blackjack, Berserk, Beastars, Cowboy Bebop, Samurai Champloo, Odd Taxi, Hikaru no Go, JoJo, Dorohedoro, Yu-Gi-Oh, Agretsuko, and so on. So, next question. If you had to give yourself advice on what to avoid when starting to learn Japanese, what would it be? Honestly, I wouldn't really change much of anything, because the way I learned was just how I found it worked best for me for my at the time circumstances. However, I will probably not use Duolingo past the first month, and I will just immerse with the time instead. So their final question, what are your plans for the channel in the early/mid future? And I think I answered this question in the previous questions, but I do want to say that in the far future, there are a bunch of projects I want to try making, which will definitely be featured on this channel as well. And here comes the final question for this video. What is your background and how did you get into programming? Well, I got into programming mostly out of curiosity in something like 2015 when I was thinking about what kind of an education and or career to strive for. I was aiming for video editing, but I also started liking programming quite a lot as well, and honestly from a career perspective when working at a company, I prefer coding over video editing. I'm definitely going to be making a big video one day about how I learned programming, but for now, I'll say that my programming skills are mostly self-taught by following YouTube tutorials, online courses, and making my own projects. Alright, so that concludes all the questions for this video, and I gotta say it was pretty fun, and I'm probably going to make more Q&A videos in the future. So as the closing note, a huge thanks to all my Patreons and supporters as always, and I'll be seeing you in some Japanese related video that I have coming up. So, bye bye, I guess.
This is what I